Have you ever judged someone by the way they looked, only to find out they were the most extraordinary person in the room? What happens when appearances deceive, and the most unassuming guest holds all the power? A simple woman mocked by snobby elite, only for them to discover she's 100 times richer than them. They saw her plain beige dress amidst their designer gowns, heard their whispers of "so poor," but never imagined the fortune behind her modest appearance, or the lesson they were about to learn. The crystal chandeliers of the Hawthorne Ballroom cast a golden glow over Boston's most exclusive charity gala. Women in designer gowns adorned with diamonds glided across marble floors, while men in tailored tuxedos exchanged business cards disguised as small talk. Vivian Lancaster adjusted her sapphire necklace, its blue stones matching her elegant dress perfectly. Beside her, Margaret Caldwell smoothed her black designer gown, while Celeste Barrington beamed in her navy blue ensemble with silver accents. Boston's social elite in the flesh. "The new hospital wing better be named after someone worthwhile this time," Vivian remarked, eyeing the roster critically. "Last year's donors were hardly established." The women nodded in agreement. A newcomer entered the ballroom. Charlotte Grayson stood in a simple beige dress, modest, unadorned, and painfully plain compared to the couture surrounding her. No statement jewelry, no designer clutch. Her auburn hair was styled simply, her makeup minimal. "Who invited her?" Celeste whispered, not bothering to lower her voice. "And in that dress, it looks like she's here for a job interview, not a $5,000 a plate charity event." Charlotte moved through the crowd with quiet confidence. At 34, she carried herself with natural grace that required no embellishment. She paused to study the architectural renderings of the Children's Hospital expansion, tonight's designated cause. Her eyes focused on details others overlooked. What none of these socialites knew was that Charlotte had spent the morning touring the hospital's current pediatric ward, learning the names of young patients and promising a little girl with leukemia that the new wing would have windows facing the garden where butterflies gathered in spring. A promise Charlotte knew would be kept. "I don't believe we've met," came a cultured voice beside Charlotte. Vivian Lancaster extended her hand, diamond bracelet catching the light. "Vivian Lancaster, Hospital Board fundraising chair." Charlotte turned, offering a genuine smile. "Charlotte Grayson, it's lovely to meet you." Vivian's smile remained fixed as her eyes assessed Charlotte's attire, searching for a designer label, finding none. "And what brings you to our little gathering tonight? Are you with the medical staff?" "No," Charlotte replied simply. "I'm just passionate about children's health care." Margaret and Celeste drifted closer, circling like elegantly dressed sharks. "We don't often see new faces at these events," Margaret commented, champagne flute poised delicately in manicured fingers. "The Hawthorne Gala is usually quite exclusive." Charlotte nodded. "The invitation mentioned the pediatric oncology wing. It's a cause close to my heart." Celeste exchanged a quick glance with Vivian, eyebrows raised. "Well, every small contribution helps, I suppose, though tonight's donors are mostly in the 6- and 7-figure range." "It adds up," Charlotte agreed pleasantly. Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly. There was something about this plain woman's confidence that unsettled her. "Your dress," she began, voice dripping with false concern. "Is it vintage?" The question hung in the air, its true meaning transparent. Margaret barely concealed a smirk behind her champagne glass. "Just simple," Charlotte replied, unperturbed. "I find elaborate designs distracting." "How practical," Vivian replied, her tone making the word sound like an insult. "We must introduce you to Montgomery Wells. He's our biggest donor from last year, $5 million for the emergency department. Monty loves meeting everyday people." Charlotte's eyes reflected a quiet wisdom. "I'd enjoy that." As they guided Charlotte across the ballroom, Vivian subtly signaled to others in their circle, rolling her eyes when Charlotte wasn't looking. Whispers followed in their wake. Who brought the secretary? Is that dress from a department store? So poor. Thing. She clearly doesn't belong here. Dr. Nathaniel Grant, the hospital's chief of pediatrics, approached their group with a warm smile. Ladies, wonderful to see you again. His eyes brightened upon seeing Charlotte. Miss Grayson, I didn't know you'd be here tonight. Vivian's perfect eyebrows arched in surprise. You two know each other? Before Charlotte could respond, Dr. Grant continued enthusiastically. Miss Grayson visited our pediatric ward this morning. Spent hours with the children. Little Sophie hasn't stopped talking about the butterfly garden you promised her. Vivian's smile tightened. How charitable. But Dr. Grant, Miss Grayson was just about to join us in meeting Montgomery Wells. Ah, Monty's caught up with the mayor at the moment. Dr. Grant replied. Perhaps Miss Grayson could share her thoughts on the new wing design while we wait. Her perspective might be valuable. Celeste gave a silvery laugh. Nathaniel, darling, I'm sure Miss Grayson is more interested in the canapes than construction plans. This is rather technical, after all. Charlotte said nothing, her expression betraying nothing. Actually, Dr. Grant replied, his tone cooling slightly. Miss Grayson asked some remarkably insightful questions about our pediatric care protocols this morning. I'd value her input. Vivian smoothly intervened. Nathaniel, we shouldn't overwhelm our guest. These events can be intimidating for newcomers. She turned to Charlotte with practiced condescension. The donor circle operates quite differently from regular hospital visitors. It's all rather complex. Across the room, the hospital's executive director ascended the small stage. Vivian's eyes gleamed with anticipation. Ladies and gentlemen, we're just moments away from revealing our major donors for the new children's wing. She whispered to her friends. This is where we shine, darlings. Charlotte glanced toward the stage, then at her watch. If you'll excuse me, I need to step out for a moment. Of course, Vivian replied, barely concealing her relief. The restrooms are down the hall to the left, though I'm not sure they can do much to help with that dress. As Charlotte walked away, Celeste leaned in. My goodness, Vivian, wherever did they find her? She looks like she wandered in from a job fair. The hospital probably invited some everyday heroes for publicity photos. Vivian replied dismissively. You know how it is. They need to show diversity in their donor materials. The working class makes for touching brochure stories. Margaret nodded smugly. Did you see her expression when you mentioned Montgomery's 5 million? I thought her eyes would pop out of her head. The women laughed, crystal glasses tinkling like wind chimes as they clinked them together in solidarity, completely unaware of the tidal shift about to upend their carefully ordered social hierarchy. Charlotte slipped back into the ballroom just as Richard Thornton, the hospital's executive director, tapped the microphone. The crowd quieted, jewelry glinting under the chandeliers as Boston's elite turned their attention to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight marks a historic chapter for Boston Children's Hospital. Thornton began, his voice resonating with practiced gravitas. The new pediatric oncology wing will revolutionize how we treat our youngest cancer patients. Vivian and her circle position themselves prominently near the front. Champagne flutes refreshed, expressions expectant. This was their moment, where donations were announced, names immortalized, and social pecking orders reinforced. Charlotte stood quietly at the back, observing. Before we unveil our donor wall, Thornton continued, I want to share something extraordinary. For the first time in our hospital's 150-year history, we've received an anonymous donation that has left our entire board speechless. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Anonymous donations weren't uncommon, but the director's tone suggested something unprecedented. Vivian frowned slightly. Anonymous donors didn't fit neatly into her social calculations. They couldn't be ranked, impressed, or leveraged for future connections. This individual contributed $25 million specifically for our pediatric oncology wing, Thornton announced, with the single condition that the new garden terrace be called Sophie's Butterfly Haven, after one of our young patients. Dr. Grant's eyes widened, his gaze immediately searching the room, until it landed on Charlotte. While we normally respect our anonymous donor's privacy, Thornton continued, this particular benefactor has given us permission to acknowledge them tonight, as they are present in this very room. Vivian's group straightened imperceptibly, each woman mentally calculating if her family could have secretly made such a donation without her knowledge. Our extraordinary benefactor has a unique understanding of childhood illness, Thornton explained. 20 years ago, she herself was a patient in our hospital, fighting a battle no child should face. Today, she continues that fight on behalf of others. The director looked across the ballroom. Miss Grayson, would you please join me on stage? The room fell silent, then erupted in confused whispers. Vivian's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips, her expression caught between disbelief and horror. There must be another Grayson here, Celeste whispered frantically, but Charlotte was already moving forward, her simple beige dress parting the sea of designer gowns like Moses at the Red Sea. The crowd watched in stunned silence as she ascended the steps to the stage with quiet dignity. Ladies and gentlemen, Thornton announced, his voice carrying over the whispers. It is my honor to introduce Miss Charlotte Grayson, founder of the Grayson Foundation for Children's Medical Research and our lead benefactor for the new oncology wing. Vivian's champagne glass nearly slipped from her fingers. Margaret's mouth formed a perfect O of shock. Celeste clutched her pearls, as if seeking reassurance from their solidity. Miss Grayson's foundation has funded groundbreaking pediatric cancer research across the country, Thornton continued, and her personal contribution of $25 million is the largest single donation in our hospital's history. Charlotte stepped forward to the microphone, her simple dress now seeming less a fashion faux pas and more a deliberate choice, a statement about values and priorities that made Vivian's designer gown suddenly feel ostentatious. Thank you, Director Thornton, Charlotte began, her voice soft but unwavering. When I was 12 years old, I spent 9 months in this hospital fighting leukemia. The doctors and nurses here didn't just save my life, they showed me what compassion truly means. The room hung on her every word, social hierarchies momentarily forgotten as they glimpsed the depth behind her unassuming exterior. Today, I'm fortunate enough to be in a position to give back, Charlotte continued. The Grayson Foundation was created with a singular mission, to ensure that every child, regardless of their family's financial circumstances, receives the same quality of care that saved my life. Dr. Grant was beaming with undisguised pride. Across the room, Vivian and her friends had gone pale, their earlier mockery replaying in their minds with devastating clarity. Sophie's Butterfly Haven will be a place of healing and hope, Charlotte explained, her eyes bright with purpose, because sometimes the smallest beings, whether butterflies or children, can teach us the most profound lessons about transformation and resilience. As Charlotte stepped away from the microphone, the ballroom erupted in applause. Director Thornton invited donors to view the architectural plans for the new wing, and the crowd surged forward, many casting curious glances at the unassuming woman now revealed to be Boston's most significant philanthropist. Vivian remained frozen in place, her world tilting on its axis. The woman she had dismissed, mocked, and patronized just minutes ago wasn't just wealthy. She was a legend in philanthropic circles, with resources that dwarfed the Lancaster family fortune. And Vivian had asked if her dress was vintage. As the crowd migrated toward the architectural display, Charlotte found herself at the center of a swirling sea of attention. Board members who had barely glanced at her earlier now competed for her acknowledgement. Donors who had whispered behind their hands now beamed with manufactured familiarity. Through the pressing crowd, Charlotte caught sight of Vivian and her friends huddled in urgent conversation. Their glances toward her carried a mixture of mortification and calculation, the latter troubling her more than the former. Dr. Grant appeared at Charlotte's side, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "I wanted to see their faces when they realized," he admitted quietly. "Is that terrible of me?" Charlotte's lips curved into a gentle smile. "I didn't do this for the reveal, Nathaniel, though I admit it does make a point." 25 million points to be exact, he replied with a chuckle. Then, more seriously, "Sophie hasn't stopped talking about her butterflies. You've given her something precious, hope with a timeline, something to look forward to." Charlotte's expression softened at the mention of the young patient. Some promises matter more than others. Their conversation paused as Vivian approached, her designer heels clicking purposefully across the marble floor. Margaret and Celeste flanked her, their expressions schooled into practiced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Miss Grayson," Vivian began, her voice honey-sweet. "What an absolutely wonderful surprise. Had we known of your foundation's important work—" "But you didn't need to know," Charlotte interrupted gently. "That's rather the point, isn't it?" Vivian faltered, her social armor developing its first visible crack. There appears to have been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Charlotte replied, her tone kind but direct. "You saw what you expected to see, a woman whose worth you measured by her clothing and connections rather than her character." Margaret stepped forward, diamond earrings catching the light. "We meant no offense. These events have certain expectations, standards." "Yes," Charlotte agreed, "and tonight has certainly been illuminating about what those standards truly are." Celeste, growing uncomfortable with the directness of the exchange, attempted to pivot. "Your foundation sounds fascinating, Charlotte. May I call you Charlotte? Perhaps we could discuss your involvement in our annual fundraiser luncheon next month. The exposure would be beneficial." "To whom?" Charlotte asked quietly. The question hung in the air, its implications unmistakable. Director Thornton approached, breaking the tense moment. "Miss Grayson, the mayor would like to personally thank you for your extraordinary contribution." Charlotte nodded graciously. "Of course." As she turned to follow the director, she paused, looking back at the three women. "The children's wing opens in 6 months. When it does, I hope you'll visit, not for a ribbon-cutting photo, but to meet the children whose lives will be transformed. Their perspectives might surprise you." Left behind, Vivian's carefully constructed facade crumbled further. "Did that just happen?" she whispered to her friends. 25 million, Margaret murmured, the number hanging between them like an indictment. "And we treated her like she wandered in from the street." Celeste's gaze followed Charlotte's retreating figure. "Who exactly is she?" "Beyond the foundation." Vivian pulled out her phone, fingers trembling slightly as she typed. Her eyes widened as results populated her screen. "The Grayson technology fortune," she breathed. Her parents were Robert and Marilyn Grayson, the tech pioneers who revolutionized medical imaging. They died in a plane crash 10 years ago. She inherited everything. "How much is everything?" Margaret pressed. Vivian looked across the room. Charlotte stood with the mayor and hospital board, her simple beige dress now the most powerful statement in the room, not because of its design or cost, but because of the woman wearing it. A woman who had the means to outshine everyone, yet chose understanding over ostentation, substance over spectacle. The evening's true beneficiaries weren't in this ballroom at all, but in hospital beds across the city. Their futures now brighter because someone who could have lived solely for herself had chosen instead to live for others. As the evening progressed, Charlotte found herself momentarily alone. studying the rendering of Sophie's butterfly haven. The garden's design included special accommodations for hospital beds and wheelchairs, allowing even the most critically ill children to experience nature's healing presence. "It's beautiful," came a voice. Vivian's, her tone now stripped of its earlier condescension. Charlotte turned. "It will be." Vivian hesitated, then spoke with unexpected sincerity. "Why didn't you say something when I was—" "Would it have mattered?" Charlotte asked. "Should it matter?" Vivian fell silent, confronting questions that had never before penetrated her carefully constructed world. "My worth, anyone's worth, isn't measured by their bank account or family name," Charlotte continued gently. "The children I visited this morning don't care about designer labels or social connections. They care about kindness, about being seen for who they are, not what they have or how they look." "I've never considered it that way," Vivian admitted, the honesty seeming to surprise even herself. "Few of us do, until something forces us to," Charlotte replied. She gestured toward the hospital rendering. "Every child who comes through these doors deserves to be treated with the same dignity and respect, regardless of their circumstances, just as every person in this room deserves the same, regardless of their dress or pedigree." Vivian's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the flush creeping up her neck. "I behaved abhorrently." "Yes," Charlotte agreed simply. "The question is, what will you do with that realization?" Before Vivian could respond, Director Thornton called for attention. The room quieted as he prepared to unveil the donor wall. Names of contributors to be immortalized in order of their donations, with Charlotte at the very top. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is with profound gratitude that we recognize those whose generosity will make our new children's wing possible. These names represent not just financial contributions, but investments in our community's future." As the velvet covering was pulled away, gasps rippled through the crowd. Where Charlotte Grayson's name should have appeared at the top of the donor wall was instead a simple inscription: "In honor of Sophie and all children fighting battles beyond their years. Your courage inspires our commitment."